Hey, what's up everyone? This is Chris back with the Bimmer Barn, and today we're going to be looking at my 335i Mechanic Special that we just purchased for the channel. I'm going to be going through the car from bumper to bumper and showing you guys exactly what is wrong with it and why. So let's take a look under the car, let's take a look in the engine bay. We're going to do a full fault code read, but first we need to move the E39 M5 wagon out of the way. So without further ado, let's get straight into today's video. Oh, and a quick update on the instrument cluster. Went ahead and received those bulbs from Amazon, replaced them on the back, and now the odometer and everything is fully lit up. All the LEDs work from our LCD screen replacement, and I was able to figure out how to use NTS Expert to code out the self-leveling suspension fault. So that's no longer going to come on all the time, and now we'll finally be able to use our display properly. And there you have it, folks. The 335 is successfully up in the air thanks to our quick jacks. The 335 actually has a very short lift point spread, so it'll fit on the quick jacks perfectly. Don't have to worry about the size. The normal small quick jacks like what I have will work great. What I did notice about this car is that it is missing a jack pad adapter underneath the car, you know, the plastic things that go into the frame. So I had to turn one of the rubber adapters from the quick jack sideways so it was taller, and it actually fit through the side skirt perfectly, and it spaced it out so the side skirt isn't touching like this metal rail here. So that is perfect. Looking in the camera here, I noticed this while editing. Is there a color difference between these two fenders, or am I just imagining it? Maybe you can tell me. I think that there might be. Over here in the engine bay, everything looks just coated with dirt, like a little bit greasy maybe, a little oily, the usual stuff, but man, just really dirty. I considered pressure washing this before we started working on it, and then I figured I would just wait till the end to pressure wash it. What is this stuff right here? There's so many leaves stuck in here. This is what happens when you park your car outside. These things just get covered in leaves. So if you ever buy a car too, and someone tells you it's garage kept, but you find leaves inside, like with a hood and spaces like that, you know they're lying. So now what we need to turn our focus to, and what I'm worried about, is the underside of the car. We need to see just how bad the oil pan is, because that's a very common leak on these things. We need to see the condition of the turbos, if those are leaking oil. I want to see what sort of downpipes are on the car, because we have factory downpipes inside the car, and it sounds like factory. I'm not sure. And so you guys are going to find out with me. Let's go ahead and remove all those 8mm bolts that are on the underside of the car that hold that plastic tray in. Then we'll have a good look inside the motor. Alrighty, got my lucky flashlight. Let's see what we find. You guys are taking a look at this for the first time, just like me. Right, so a lot of oil buildup on like the water pump thermostat. Oh, we got our down pipes right here. Test pipes, whatever you want to call them. Got a snail. There you go. Look at this snail right here. Snail growing on the exhaust. A lot of oil over here. Very wet. This is wet. Also, let me know in the comments if you guys see anything that I'm missing too. Oil for sure. Now it's kind of hard to do two things at a time. Hold the camera and hold the light. What is this? I'm just seeing this now. Look at this belt shred. Might have to do a belt, maybe a tensioner. Something's off. The belt's shredding. That's no good. We all know about that dreaded front main seal problem that happens when the belt flies off and gets sucked in. Don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and take a full look over the car now, and I'm going to write down a list of the items or the leaks that I see, and then we'll go over it together. All right, now before we get into the top of this motor and start looking at what leaks or what other problems we might have on the top end, I'm gonna go ahead and put on my official Bimmer barn apron, and that's gonna help me keep my shirt clean. Now this apron has a high quality tricolor stitching on the front showing your favorite YouTube channel. And then we also have two pockets on the front to put our tools in or our hands in case we need to keep those warm. And my favorite part is that since this is a black apron, we can go ahead and just wipe our hands on the front here, keep our clothes clean, and when we need to, throw this in the washer and it'll be clean as new. So check out these aprons and help support your favorite YouTube channel at thebimmerbarn.com. Without further ado, let's get right back to work. All right, so we're finished looking over the engine. I have done a front to back inspection on this car now, and I think we have a pretty good idea of the condition of most things. I also was playing around with the iCarSoft for a while and trying to figure out what the issue is with the lights. But for now, let's go ahead and just talk about the motor and what needs to be done in order to get this thing running better. Now, I have the airbox off. That gives us a better look at everything. And right here, you can see the high pressure pump. That's what needs to be replaced. That's what's causing our misfire, our limp mode, just about everything. So we have fuel that's being pressed from the back of the car to the front, and it's going through this pump and just going to the rail, and it's barely making enough to run this car naturally aspirate, I guess. So there's not enough high pressure so that when the car goes in a boost, it's basically not getting enough fuel. So that has to be replaced, but the good news is that we have a replacement part that came with the car. Now, I'm not a big fan of aftermarket diverter valves usually, and these ones just look really clunky. They would not be my go-to choice for this car. And the worst part is that these are attached to a factory charge pipe. So your charge pipe is probably going to crack the first time that you put any hard boost through it, or once you go to a tune, probably going to explode. So we're going to have to probably change that later. Now, over here, look at this. Something that you guys should watch out for on your cars is when the hoses turn color like this, that means that the plastic is drying out. It's turning brown instead of black like it originally was. and this will break so easily. What we usually see is this nipple that holds the expansion tank hose on, that one will break off and then you have to replace the whole hose, or that hose itself, it actually will start cracking here where it's clamped on, and it'll start leaking and spraying fluid onto the engine bay, and you'll get like this blue mist. So something to watch out for when you're buying a 335i is if you see any of the engine covers or the expansion tank, or if you see anything covered with some light blue drops that dried on like water, that is coolant, and it could be coming from any one of these things, or it could be coming from a hole in the radiator. It's basically an indicator that there's a coolant leak in the system, and you could clean it off, but if you were to take it for a drive, for example, and then come back and pop the hood, you'd have more coolant. Now, while we're near the valve cover gasket, that brings me to a big concern for this car, and that is the condition of the valve cover gasket. It needs to be replaced. So we already saw underneath the car how much oil splatter there is. But when you get up here and you pull out a ignition coil, you see that these things just get covered in oil. That's because the valve cover gasket fails, and then oil starts pulling up inside of this channel where the injectors and the spark plugs are. So it'll cause misfires for sure. It'll cause these coils to fail. That's not good either. I mean, the oil will cause more issues. So if you have a valve cover gasket issue, take care of it quickly. Now, the other leak that we're concerned about is the oil filter stand. So this oil filter stand here is mated to the block and has a gasket in there, and there are two passages that come through it. One is for oil and one is for coolant. So what happens is that when that gasket fails, you get coolant and oil which intermix, and that is what causes our issue like this. Now, currently this gas cap doesn't have any of that condensation or that milky oil that we saw before, but I'm sure that it is an issue because we have a lot of oil spray from the front of the motor down here, and it is dirty. So we're gonna have to address the oil filter stand, and we're gonna be doing that in an upcoming video. Now, something aftermarket that bothers me is this catch can right here. I don't really see a purpose most of the time, especially on a car that's stock, to have a catch can like this. And I don't really like this setup here. It seems, pretty flimsy. Doesn't really seem like it was made for the N54. You've got some weird adapters going to the factory hose over here. It's cut into. What I think we're gonna do is we're just gonna replace that hose there. Get rid of this catch can, not worry about it, clean up the engine bay, and just get a brand new OEM hose to go from our valve cover to our intake pipe. Now let's go ahead and take a look over the fluids. The expansion tank is broken. So internally there's supposed to be a bobber, and it would float and pop out of here to tell you, oh, hey, the coolant's good, or it would be low if the coolant was low. But you can't even see it, and that's because it broke off in there. So there it is. You can see the top of it broken off, and that is just a very common thing. These expansion tanks also fail when they get old, and around the crack here, this seam starts to open up, and it allows coolant out as well, and that'll cause that blue mist that we were talking about to spray and dry up in the engine bay. Now, I was also worried about the power steering on this system because it was making some noise, but it is actually just bone dry in here, so that's probably a problem. We need to get some fresh power steering fluid in there, and then the brake fluid like we talked about. I always find these cars with brown, dirty brake fluid, so that has to be flushed out as well. The next time that I start the car, I'm going to be inspecting this belt a little more closely to see what the issue is. It could just be slipping around from some of the oil and causing this to shred up. It could be an old belt, or it could be a belt tensioner that's bad, and that would be causing our belt to wear prematurely and cause this spin off like that. So we're going to have to address that for sure. Now let's take a look at the suspension. I was surprised when I looked under the car here not to find lowering springs. Turns out that this car actually has coilovers, but only in the front. So if you can recognize these coilovers, let me know in the comments down below, but they're only installed in the front. In the rear, we still have the factory suspension. So it's kind of weird. Car looks pretty good as far as stance in my opinion for what it is, but we do have new struts to replace, as well as springs and height adjusters to install, and I think that's what we'll be doing in an upcoming episode as well, maybe a part of some other service and maintenance. We're just going to finish the coilover install. Now, if we look under the car, I'll show you some of the things that I saw while I was working under there. It looks like a possible rear main seal leak, but I think that it's just an oil pan leak because I can see where else on the oil pan it's leaking, and you would usually be able to tell this by like the brown color. I'll show a picture of that here. We have a heavy concentration of oil. And then here is a picture of the turbo oil line, which appears to be sweating a little bit, or it could just be buildup from other leaks or oil that was splashed and dried up on that particular spot. So we're gonna keep our eye on that. Now, taking a look under here, we checked out these suspension bushings, the front control arm bushings, and it turns out that they are just shot. Now, I've got my medium pry bar here, and it's actually pretty small of a pry bar. It's probably a foot long total. So I'm not really getting a lot of leverage on this control arm, but you can see that I'm able to make the bushing actually touch the outside where the subframe is. Now, that is not good because when you hit the brakes, your wheel's going to be moving around and you can actually hear that clunk of it hitting the subframe and telling you, hey, the control arms are bad. So we're probably going to have to address this situation. It is not too bad, but it does need to be addressed, and I figure that we have the tool to do it, so maybe we could make a video on it. So otherwise, everything down in the engine underneath it is pretty good. Now, like I said, we have some oil buildup in a lot of places. So we need to address the top side of the motor first and then clean everything really well to see if there are still any leaks from the bottom end. I also am curious about the turbos, and I want to see just how bad the condition is because we have a brand new turbo in the trunk, but it's only one and this car has two. So we might end up rebuilding the turbos completely. I think that'd be pretty interesting to show you guys. We pull the turbo off and then replace all the internal seals in it, show you guys how the TD03 turbo is set up and how you can save a couple bucks by rebuilding it yourself instead of sending it to the dealer or sending it out to another shop to get rebuilt by hand when you could just do it at home. So now let's go ahead and get the fault reader out and let's scan all the lights that we have on the dashboard and determine what needs to be fixed. So one of the first things that concerns me is the footwell control module, and that has some faults for the stepper motors in the headlights as well as the high beams as well as some other lights. And when I clear the faults out, they come back, at least for the stepper motors, they come back immediately, but we have more lights off. Now, I think some of these can be addressed by bulbs. Now, I was playing around in the back of the car. It looks like one of the brake light and the reverse lights is out, but it could just be the bulb. So we're gonna try replacing all the bulbs in the car first, including the HID bulbs, because those may have failed. And then once we have done that, we can determine if there are any other issues in the footwell or in the light modules. Now, another light that concerns us is the ABS module. So when we scan that, we see that the car has a multitude of wheel speed sensor codes. Now, when I clear it, I get two codes that come back. I believe it's front left and rear right, but those codes come back without driving. So I do want to confirm that those are the wrong wheels. Once we get the car out of the garage, we can drive it and then bring it back in and scan the code and see which wheels aren't reading. And then we'll have to replace those wheel speed sensors so that we can get rid of the ABS light. And the last set of codes that we have is just around the engine, and we have some misfire codes and we have codes for the high pressure fuel pump. And so we know that that has to be replaced. So we're going to go ahead and replace that in the next video. And then hopefully that gets this car at least somewhat drivable so we can determine what else needs to be done. Oh, and obviously one of my concerns that I'm sure everyone is aware of and probably thinking about is the valves on this motor and the dreaded N54 intake cleaning procedure that you have to do. So in an upcoming episode, we will show you guys how much carbon is built up there, and we will show you how to clean it as well without a walnut blaster, but with solvents instead. And it's going to be a little bit more time consuming, but it's going to yield us a great result, and I can't wait to show you guys how it works. And now I present to you everything wrong with my 335i. Valve cover gasket, oil filter stand gasket, oil coolant gasket, high pressure fuel pump, shredded drive valve, both front low beams are out, bad control arm bushings, upper radiator hose, expansion tank is bad, missing power steering fluid, brake fluid needs to be flushed, need a new charge pipe, we're missing a jack pad adapter, bad wheel speed sensor, and we need to fix the PCV system. Sorry, I just had to catch my breath. That's a long list right there. Can't wait. So guys, that is everything that is mechanically wrong with my 335i. Really is a mechanic special. So I'm excited to get into the car, and actually the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the high pressure fuel pump. I'm going to get some footage around that and kind of show you guys how that's done in the next video, but that should at least get the car running. And then we have to worry about a lot of other things on the car. And I think I'm just going to take you through step by step with every repair that you do, kind of show you how it's done, sort of a DIY, but also more than that, more of like explaining what we're doing, why it's common, what's happening. And that way you guys might learn something. So if you enjoyed today's video, leave a like down below. Drop a comment if you want to see us do some special stuff with this 335i, and subscribe if you want to see more BMW content like this. We'll see you next time.